Hey everybody, and welcome to How to Talisman. If you are an experienced Talisman player, this is probably not the video for you. But if you've seen other people play this game, if you've considered playing this game, if you've had any inclination whatsoever to play it, and have just been kind of overwhelmed with all of the minutiae and details and nuances of the gameplay, I think this video might be good in terms of helping you get started in the game and getting over that initial hump of learning the facets of how the game actually works. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right in here and set up our first single player game. Now, the reason I'm going to be playing a single player game here is twofold. One is it actually is going to allow me to take as much time looking at the board and the various cards that come up as I need to explain various things. And it's also going to allow us to play against the AI, which, while reasonably competent in this game, is certainly not going to be anywhere near the challenge that actual human players would be. So what I like to do whenever I'm trying to explain the rules of this game to somebody for the first time is to set up a simple two-player game. We're going to have us as the human player and one AI. Now the other thing you need to look at whenever you're setting up a Talisman game is the rules and expansions that you might want to use while playing the game. So that's this big flashing button down here that we're going to hit, and it's going to let us go in and look at all the different expansion packs and house rules that we can enable when playing this game. What I'm going to do for our purposes here today is set up a very basic vanilla version of the game. So I'm not going to enable any of these expansion packs. You can see here I have them all turned off for the time being. I am, however, going to fiddle around with some of these house rules and explain how a few of them work to you, just to give you a general idea of what's going on with those. Talisman is a very nuanced game in the sense that there's a lot of different things you can do when setting up the game that are going to dramatically impact the way that it plays out. But just as a baseline and a standard for how we might do things moving forward, I want to play a standard vanilla game with you just to show you where we're starting from so that if you decide you want to do some of these rules later, you understand what you're actually changing. So one house rule that I almost always leave on is random characters, and that's because I feel like a big part of playing this game is playing the character that you are dealt at the beginning of the game. So rather than going in and selecting a character specifically to play, I think the big part of the fun of the game is having a character given to you and trying to figure out how to win the game with that character. Now, I do appreciate being able to have some say in how that plays out, so I also usually enable this character selection rule. And what that does is it presents you with 3 characters to choose from at the beginning of the game, and you can then decide which one of them most appeals to you. I'm also going to enable standard characters for this playthrough, and that's because I don't want any of the special expanded characters included in this particular game. We're going to play this with just the standard vanilla characters that come with the base game. So no expansion packs, no character packs. Now you notice some of these house rules are actually grayed out, and that's because the expansion packs that are associated with them aren't turned on at the moment. We're also going to disable this sudden death rule, which is going to mean that we're going to have to play this game to its normal completion. With the sudden death rule enabled, we could set a turn limit, which would allow us to say how many rounds we want the game to actually take to play. But in this particular case, I want to be as legit as possible in terms of presenting what the vanilla game experience is like, so we're not going to use sudden death. We're also not going to use Race to the Crown, a way to shorten the game up such that whoever gets to the Crown of Command at the center of the board first wins the game. We're not going to do that here. We're also not going to use the No More Lives rule. Now, again, these are rules that you may actually want to use when setting up your own game, and I'll explain why these house rules are relevant when we get to the end of this game. But just to give you the pure vanilla Talisman experience, we're not going to enable any of these. Talisman Bloodbath is another way to streamline the gameplay, basically making it so that only one of the items you need to reach the center of the board and the end of the game exists in the game at any moment in time. Replacing quests is a function that's only really valid or necessary whenever you're playing with expanded characters. There are a few quests that can be given in the game that aren't compatible with certain characters that are added to the game through various character packs. But since we're not using any of the expanded characters, it's also not necessary for us to be able to replace quests. And additionally, because we're playing the vanilla version of the game, the quests that we might get in the course of this gameplay aren't going to be anything that we would ever have to worry about replacing anyway. Again, some more grayed out options here because of the fact that the expansions associated with them aren't enabled. And this final option, Runestones, I almost never use this in a game. Basically, it's the ability to add little perks and bonuses to your character to make the game easier for them. The only time I could really see this option being valid or useful is if you're in a situation where you're playing the game with a bunch of experienced people versus somebody who's never played before. You might want to give the person who's never played before some runestones to give them a fair fighting chance in the game. But for our purposes here, runestones are definitely not necessary. So, having set up all of those rules and having determined how many players we're actually going to play against, bearing in mind that you could actually have up to 5 AI players in this game if you wanted to, but for our purposes here, I want to keep the game moving along rather quickly and not get bogged down. So we're going to just have one AI opponent so that I can focus on what their character and my character are doing as we work our way through this.